Hi, and welcome to another video by Jim the Car Guy. Today we have a 2006, it's a Honda CRV with a 2.4 liter engine. We're going to be replacing the starter motor on this. This is the starter motor itself, so we're going to be replacing this today. Now I will point this out to you, the 2.4 liter engine, whether it's on an Accord, an Element, or anything else that has the 2.4 liter engine is going to be the exact same procedure. Now that starter motor, if you're looking at the engine, you probably can't even see where the starter is located. On this particular vehicle, you do have to remove the plenum to gain access to the starter motor. So let me bring you over. I'm going to show you where it is, and then we're going to get started. Okay, so the starter motor itself is actually located down in there, believe it or not. You can't even see it down in there, let alone get to it. That's why we need to take off everything that you see in the front right here so we can gain access to it. So the first thing we're going to do before we do anything, we're going to disconnect the negative battery cable so that we make sure we have no issues with any kind of shorts or anything like that, or by accident shorting something out. We're going to come in here, we're going to remove this snorkel assembly right here. We're going to disconnect all of these plugs that you see on the side right here. We're going to take off this cover here, 10mm bolts right here and here. We're going to remove that hose there, and there should be another vacuum hose here and possibly a couple of more down in there. So and that's it. And then once we get down in here, we're going to take out a 12mm bolt here, and there's a few more 12mm around in there. Now before you get started, make sure you have your starter, and also make sure you have an intake manifold gasket, because once you remove this manifold, you cannot reuse that gasket. All right, let's get some tools and let's get started. Okay, now we're just going to go over what kind of tools we're going to need. You're going to need a set of ratchets, sockets, an extension for your ratchet. You're going to need a pair of pliers such as this, or possibly another set of pliers like this to get those clamps off here, and to get these clamps. We're going to also have our 1/4" ratchet set. We may need that as well, but we're going to see how it goes. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to disconnect our battery cable, and like I said, I disconnect the negative. Not that it makes any difference which one you connect, as long as it's disconnected. All right, so now we're just going to put that cable away out of this location so we don't have a problem. We're going to remove. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take off these bolts here, just so we can gain access to the plenum itself. We're going to spray it up with some penetrating oil now, so that when it goes back in, we're not going to have any problem putting it back in. Now you can see it's a little bit rusty right on there, so we're just going to let it put a little bit of penetrating oil on it, just like this, and then we'll put this off to the side so it'll be ready to put it back in later. And now this cover comes right off like this, and we're going to put this off to the side as well. Okay, now before we go any further inside, let's get this out of the way as well. All right, now before we go any further, taking everything off inside here, we are going to take off this plenum intake right here. So we're going to. You can use a Phillips head screwdriver, or you can use a Phillips head screwdriver, or you can use a 10mm. We're just going to pull these wires out of the way right here. And we're going to disconnect that little piece right there. You push that little tab in, and you can pull it and disconnect it. And there's a very small vacuum hose down underneath there as well. We're going to also remove that vacuum hose. You want to be careful not to damage anything, because we do have to put it back on. This out. Be very careful because sometimes they're held on with the little wires are in these little tabs right here, so we just have to be careful when we take that off. And we're going to put this on the side. That was the one that I told you we had to disconnect. To do also, I am going to remove this latch right here because I've had this already where the latch kind of interferes with the plenum coming out. So I'm just going to take this latch off right now, and we're just going to relocate this off to the side. We're just going to lift this up out of the way like that. And we really don't need to go any further with that. I'm going to relocate these so we don't drop them. And now we're going to unplug all of the electrical connectors on here. And there's a little tab here. You just push it in and you can pull them off. As you can see, this is held in right here. So we're going to try to save that connector because I do want to use that over again. I don't want to destroy it, so I'm going to get a pair of needle nose pliers and we'll work that out of there. Not going to be able to get that out of there, it's kind of tight. So we're going to do it a different way. We're going to take off this little 10mm here. It holds the mounting bracket on there. And then we have that disconnected like that. You want to make sure you put the bolts back where you previously took them out to, so we're just going to screw it in the top here so we know where this one goes because they are different lengths. I'm going to unplug this here, same thing. There's a little tab. Now sometimes these tabs, because they've been on there for a long time, sometimes they're pretty tight, so watch you don't break them, okay? I'm going to disconnect that wiring harness on the side over here. There's a little 10mm bolt right here. I'll bring in that. I'll show you what I mean. See that little 10mm bolt right there? I'm actually taking that out just so we can get the harness disconnected because it's actually in a really tight place to get in there with a pair of needle nose pliers, and we don't want to break those brackets off there, so we're going to do it like that. And now as you can see, that's all disconnected. Okay? Next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to take off this hose right here, and down on the bottom, if you can see these hoses right down here, this one, and there's another one down there behind it, they actually have antifreeze in them, so we're going to be careful when we take those hoses off that we don't lose antifreeze all over the ground. As you can see, I elected, instead of taking it off here, because this one for some reason won't even turn, I just decided to take it off over here instead. Not that it's a big deal, we're just going to take it off at a different location. And now we're going to take off this one here, take our clamp, squeeze it, move it up, and then we'll pull this back as well. We're going to do the same thing right here. Pull this off now as well. I'm just going to stick this off to the side like that. And disconnect the other vacuum hoses here as well. Now this we probably don't have to move, but I'm going to get this out of the way I think anyway. Now we're going to see how that goes. Okay, so now we have everything just about disconnected. We need to take off those two lines on the bottom to carry the coolant. So that's what we're going to do. I just want to show you where those hoses are located. Down here is the hoses. You can see one right here and the other is back over there. Now you can see I put vice grips on it to try to minimize the amount of fluid loss. So I just pinched off these lines very, very loosely, and now we're going to disconnect these two. It's easier to get in here with a pair of needle nose pliers just to push the hose clamp back. Okay, the clamps are pushed back. We're just going to give the lines a little turn before we try to pull them off. Okay, we'll disconnect the one. Now we'll disconnect the second one. Again, we're going to give it a little bit of a turn. Okay, cables are disconnected. The lines are disconnected. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take out those 12mm bolts right there. Okay, now we're just going to move this very lightly, very easy, just to make sure everything is disconnected. Should have another vacuum hose somewhere, but I don't see it. There it is. The other vacuum hose is right on this switch right here. Alright, so as you can see, it's just pretty tight coming out. Okay, now that we have the intake out, I just want to point this out to you. I didn't show you this plug right here. We needed to unplug that. So that was a little pin on the side that we had to push it, and then we disconnected that. So that we're just going to relocate to the side right now. We took off our vacuum hose right off of here, and that's it. And this is where the starter is located, right here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect that 17 millimeter there, and there should be a 14 millimeter right here. We're going to disconnect that as well. We're going to disconnect our power lead, and then we should be able to remove it. Now this, as you can tell, I knocked it off when I was working in here, but that comes right off just like that. Okay? Okay, so we're going to lift this up now so we can gain access to the positive terminal. Should be a 12 or 13 millimeter. Looks like it's going to be a 12. Usually the starter comes with a new nut, but we'll just put this on the side just in case. We're going to disconnect our lead like that. And now we know our start side wire was already disconnected. We're going to take off this connector right here that's attaching the harness on there. We're going to squeeze it and pull it off. Just like that. And now we're going to take out that's the bolt. We'll put that to the side for now. And now we're going to take out that 17. That bad boy was tight. We're going to put some Never-Seez or some WD-40 on this before we put it back in. Okay, and that is our starter. Alright, let's grab the new starter. We're going to match it up, and we're going to put it back together. Okay, so now that we have the starter out, we're going to match it up against the new starter to make sure that everything is the same. We're going to make sure it's the same thickness here. We're going to also make sure it's the same thickness there. Make sure that the drive is the same length on the drive itself, which you can see it is. We're going to make sure that our connections are the same here and here. They're the same. And make sure that this connection and this connection are the same. So everything looks good, including the bracket that I need right here, because I do need to put our wiring harness back in. The only thing is you can see this one here, how it was straight. Somebody bent this one, so we're just going to bend this back into the position that we need it before we put it back into the vehicle. See right here? Actually, they put it on backwards actually, so we're going to have to switch this piece over here. So let me do that, and then we're going to put this back together. Okay, so now we're going to spray up our bolts with some WD-40. So we don't have this problem in the future. You can use WD-40, you can use Never-Seez, whatever works for you. All right. Okay. Now we're going to take our starter and we're just going to lay it in there. We're not going to tighten anything up yet. We're just going to push it in. And now we're going to take our bolt. You remember the one that was a pain in the rear end to get off? We're going to catch this one loosely by hand first. Okay, now once we have that loosely caught, we're going to take our longer bolt and we're going to catch this by hand as well. Okay, now we have them both caught loosely. We're just going to snug them down just till they're fairly close to touching. You know what? Let's bring you in there so you can see what I'm doing. It's a little tough to do that from there, but let's give it a try here, all right? Let's see what we can do here. Now really I'd be holding that starter with my left hand while I'm turning this in, but unfortunately in this case I need 3 hands and I don't have them. You'd really be holding this in there when you're tightening these bolts. So we're just going to snug it down till we get close. Okay, and now that we have this one caught, we're going to turn in that one up on top there. I'm going to have to do this with the ratchet. So I'm going to put you back on the holder. I'm going to snug this down till it's just about tight, like that. Okay, now once we have everything snugged up fairly tightly, now we can tighten up the bolts on the starter. We have them evenly tight, so now we're going to snug it down all the way. Okay, and now once we have the starter tight, we're going to put our power lead back on. And catch that by hand as well. Okay, once it's tight, you put your cover back on. Okay, so now after we have the power lead connected on, we put our start wire back on too, and you make sure it's pushed in all the way. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to clean up this intake area right here, on here, and then we're going to change the gaskets right here. These gaskets here, we're going to replace them. We have a new set, so we're going to put these on, and then we're going to lay the manifold back in. Okay, now that we have the manifold cleaned up and the new gasket on, we have the intake here cleaned up as well. We're going to lay the manifold back in there, being careful not to damage anything. Okay. Alright, so now we have the manifold back inside here. I just want to point this out to you as well. These 2 studs that were up inside here, I did take these studs out because it was actually interfering with the top of the plenum right here where it was going back in. And the way you get it out is you just put 2 nuts together like this, screw them together, and then you take a wrench, put it on this one, and you can take the stud right out just like that. Alright? Okay, once we have the manifold laid back in, we reconnected our vacuum line here. We reconnected the other vacuum line on the bottom. We plugged back in the EGR valve here. And now we're going to catch all of the bolts that hold the plenum together. Okay. Now what we're going to do before we go any further, we're going to reattach those 2 coolant hoses right here. You can see where I put a bolt in the end of it. We're going to reattach these coolant hoses back onto the plenum first, and then we'll come back and I'm going to plug in everything that's here that's disconnected. And so let me do that, and then we'll come back. Okay, so now that we have everything here reconnected, all of our connectors are plugged back in. These 2 we're going to put back on when we put the air snorkel back on. We plugged in the side of the throttle body. Our coolant lines are both connected up down the bottom, and the clamps are slid back up. Our brackets are reconnected down here and up here. Our hose is back here, and the clamp is slid back in position. This hose here is screwed back on, or put back on, and the clamp is in the right position. Everything over here on the solenoid is reconnected. Our plug is plugged back in down on the bottom of the valve here, the EGR. And the manifold bolts are all tight. Next thing we're going to do now is we're going to lay back our snorkel inside there. reconnect our battery up, and then hopefully this thing starts. You know, I was joking when I said, hopefully this will start. I am 100% confident it's going to start. It's going to start right up. All right, let's let our snorkel back in. Remember, we have our vacuum line here and our plug right there. And then we're going to put this back on, and we're going to reattach our wires into the connectors where they belong so they don't rub up against anything. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to reattach our hood latch where it belongs. Okay. Now we're going to catch all three of them first before we tighten anything up. And last but not least, we're going to reconnect our 10mm ground. We're going to tighten that up a little bit. Okay. Now we are going to put this cover back on, but before I put this cover back on, I want to start it up and make sure it's okay. We're just going to eyeball everything. Before you ever start a car, always go over it and go through it in your mind to make sure that everything is reconnected the way it's supposed to be. Okay, all right, we're good to go. All right, let's get inside and let's start it up. I'm going to put you guys right here. You go watch what's going on. Here we go. Alright, so everything here is good. We're going to put our cover back on and we're going to road test it, make sure everything is perfect. Alright, so we're in good shape now. Just again, eyeball everything, make sure that you put everything back on, make sure all the wires are back into the holders where it belongs, because the worst thing that can possibly happen is years down the road, 6 months, whatever down the road, those wires, if they're not put back in their holder and they rub up against a corner, they're going to wind up wearing through and you're going to have a problem. So that's it, this job is done. We are going to take this outside. We're going to rinse it down with some regular clean water because we do have a little bit of antifreeze that's laying on the bottom there from where we disconnected those hoses. So we're going to top off the antifreeze. Don't forget to do that, that's very important. And that's it, we're done. Alright, so this car is finished and on to the next one. Alright, as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.